Hi everyone, welcome to a special ICBA cast. I'm Jordan Bateman, the Vice President of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. And it used to be when I was with the Taxpayers Federation, people would say, hey, I saw you on TV. I saw you on TV railing against the government. Now they say that about this guy here, Jas Johal, MLA for Richmond-Queensborough. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's good to be back. Good to be back. It's probably been a good year. But
you were, I think, our very first guest on the ICBA cast.
Really?
In the old office when we had like...
Yes,
I had to hold a mic and now...
I remember in the boardroom there.
Exactly.
And I think you used a couple of books stacked up.
Totally. We were very high tech then.
Yes. This is pro, my friend.
Now we're moving on. Now we're moving on to the bigger, better things. Okay.
Yeah.
Jas, lots of things I want to talk to you about. But first of all, I want to talk about an issue near and dear to our heart as a construction association. I'll start with a little story.
Yeah.
I was at my kids' art camp last week. They've been, it was like the end of camp show, and they're showing off all their stuff. And I run into a gentleman. He's like, "Oh, hey, you're Jordan from the ICBA." I'm like, "Yeah, nice to meet you." He says, "I own a company who owns 22 dump trucks, and we were busy like crazy trucking in sand and gravel for the Massey Bridge." Mm-hmm. And we had a subcontract from mainland. We were adding more trucks, more drivers, more jobs, and then bang, NDP takeover, and that thing's dead. And he said, have you seen the pilings are rusting by the side of the road? I said, I have seen that. It's funny you should mention it. We did a birthday cake. Here we are, 2 years since John Horgan took power.
Yeah.
We have gotten absolutely nowhere on Massey.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, that individual should be thanked because he, along with his co-workers, done a great job delivering that sand. In fact, it's still sitting there, 6.5 kilometers long. I took my car and I on the speedometer, actually measured it. So from my side of the riding in Richmond-Queensborough through the tunnel and then into Ian Payton's South Delta riding, it came out to about 6 kilometers.
It's crazy.
And I was driving by there yesterday. The plants have gotten a little bit higher. It's still sitting there, and the NDP says that they'll use it for the next project, which I guess is the Patullo project. The Massey is dead under the old plan that we had as BC Liberals. That's $100 million wasted in regards to prepping the project. It was shovel ready. So now we have the mayors basically saying we want probably a tunnel underneath the river. So to do so, you're going to have a pretty steep grade, first of all, to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not an engineer, and neither are the 5 mayors who arbitrarily decided this is what we want. Now, in estimates, our leader, Andrew Wilkinson, pushed really hard in regards to the Premier and trying to get him to actually say, is it going to be a tunnel underneath the river? The Premier did say that there potentially could be a bridge still.
Okay.
So we've canceled the bridge. We've canceled the bridge to potentially announce another bridge.
Yeah.
So get that. Number one, what I'm looking at, and I'll say, and this is all from estimates.
Yeah.
What I'm also looking at is we said 10 lanes. Now, 2 of those lanes on either side of one each would be bus-only lanes. There was $500 million in transit improvements, not just for the bridge, but the turnoffs and getting that bus traffic to SkyTrain in Richmond at a much faster pace, making it much easier for people to take transit to downtown Vancouver. So whatever they announce, if it's 8 lanes, first of all, it's not apples to apples. I'm also looking at the transit improvements that were promised. My worry is with their community benefit agreements or union benefit agreements, whatever you want to call it, they may have to reduce the scope of the project to come in at the same price that we did and say, look, we built you something, but you're not going to get the same thing. Remember, this is a $3.5 billion project, and the best bid that we got, $2.6 billion, so $900 million under budget. We were months from it being shovel ready, and these guys just arbitrarily came along and canceled it. So watch for whatever they announce. It better meet the amenities that bridge was providing. 10 lanes. Space for a potential SkyTrain extension one day as well.
Yeah.
You build for a city 50 years from now.
Yes.
Not for what present political leadership, whether it's municipal or provincial, want. At the end of the day, that's a provincial highway.
Yeah.
So really, it's not a municipal responsibility.
Yeah.
And we're already hearing about London Drugs threatening to leave because they have a distribution center right at number 5 Road in Steveston on the entrance to the tunnel from the Richmond side. That's their distribution center. Now imagine being a truck driver there, and I see it all the time because my constituency office is right there as well. The amount of people who get angry, like around 2 o'clock, it's a no-go zone in that shopping area called Ironwood Plaza because it may take you half an hour to go 2 blocks just to get into the tunnel. Yeah. So it's a huge bottleneck. It's 80,000 people per week that get stuck there. And remember, it's not a Richmond Bridge or a Delta Bridge. It's a bridge for travelers coming across the border.
Bridge,
It's the Ferries Bridge. It's for the Tuassins First Nation.
It's the Delta Port Bridge.
Exactly. I mean, the Tuassins First Nation alone have built that shopping mall
Yep.
and are now building townhouses and single-family homes. There will be 8,000 people living on TFN land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, on top of the growth in Delta.
On top of the growth
Yep.
in South Delta. So this is just going to get worse. So at this point, I'm sad to say, but that project is now canceled. There's nothing in the capital budget for anything new. They're now starting afresh and new. But the one thing I can congratulate the NDP on is that they have promised $40 million in LED lighting for a 60-year-old tunnel.
That's great. And a coat of paint. Don't forget the
And a coat of paint.
You know, the funny thing is, right, they've done 145 studies, I believe, on a new Massey Tunnel, but the 146 that they're doing now is going to be the one that finally puts us over the top.
You can go through 13,000 pages of consultation. I think it's like 40 meetings with TransLink. Just as many, if not more, with Richmond and Delta and other municipalities and Metro Vancouver.
Yeah.
And we're going to do what we do best in Canada, is study something to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But think about that. We have debates over pipelines.
Yeah.
Now we're going to oil pipelines, natural gas pipelines, even though that's been approved by First Nations across the board. We still have some protesters. Now we're going to debate a bridge.
Yep.
So my concern broadly is what we're telling international investors is stay away.
Yes.
That we have turned into a province and to a certain degree a country of incrementalism.
Yeah.
We debate things to death where we just move slowly and slowly and slowly.
Yep.
We don't think big anymore.
No.
Like Site C and LNG took 5 or 6 years of planning and consultation and really selling to the people of British Columbia why we need to do it. What are the NDP doing today that's going to get a $40 billion investment 5 years from now? What are they doing today that's going to guarantee Site C, which is supposed to, the end of the day, power the very electric cars they want to see everybody driving by 2040?
No, exactly. Yeah, one more point before we move off of Massey. I mean, John Horgan's been all over the map on this. I mean, you and I and Ian Patton did a little photo op on the 60th birthday of the Massey Tunnel, had a birthday cake, talked about the 60-minute wait that many commuters were facing. Horgan, I love Trevor, the cameraman from Global. He's a great guy, but he's not like the investigative journalist grilling the premier on this. Goes over to the premier's photo op and says, well, what are you going to do at Massey? And just on the fly, Horgan completely makes something up. Oh, well, we're doing, it's going to be really soon. We're going to twin the tunnel. We're going to, complete news to his transportation minister, who the week before had just said, no, we may get to a business plan by the end of 2020.
Yeah, and what that tells you is that, A, he was making it up on the fly.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to the power of the Premier's office and particularly his Chief of Staff as well. Some of those files that they've handed to their ministers are actually being controlled and run from the side of the Premier's desk or by his Chief of Staff. I don't believe for a moment that the Minister of Transportation is leading the file and leading the fight when it comes to the Massey Tunnel.
No.
I don't believe for a minute the Minister of Transportation is leading the fight when it comes to ride-hailing in British Columbia. That is done through the Premier's office and his Chief of Staff, Jeff Meggs.
Yeah. Now here's the perplexing thing for me, Jas. Today, the media is all abuzz because there was some nonsense report put out that there's going to be high-speed rail from Vancouver to Seattle to Portland between $24 and $42 billion. Of course, we in Vancouver, being in the north, that's a wonderful thing, would end in Surrey and head south. We can't even build a tunnel for the commuters and the taxpayers who actually live in this community. Now we're going to put in billions of dollars towards a connection to Portland. Are we really saying to people living in Chilliwack, it's going to be quicker for you to commute to Seattle than it is to downtown Vancouver?
Actually, we are. I mean, I think it's one of those classic mid-July stories that sound great when you read it. And I know there are many of us who would love to see a high-speed train. Is it our number one priority? No, it's not. The biggest challenge for these types of train systems, which I think are wonderful in regards to moving people, is that you need a high-density population.
Right.
And we don't have that. We're a population of 5 million people here in British Columbia, 2.5 million in Vancouver. Seattle's probably about roughly the same size, maybe a little bit bigger with its extended area.
Portland's slightly smaller.
Smaller. I'm not sure there's a critical mass.
You lived in Asia. You tell me. You used high-speed rail.
I took the first Beijing to Shanghai high-speed rail train.
Just two tiny cities.
Yeah, really. 2 tiny cities of about 20 million each, and in between many others. And actually, it works because it's a 5-hour ride. But by the time I leave my house, go to the Beijing airport, check in, get on the flight, land, grab my luggage, and go back, it's roughly about the same time, or maybe a little bit faster, but it's much easier to take that ride. But you got a significant amount of population, probably 1.3 billion, but that portion of China has a significantly most of the Chinese population there. It works. It would work in a New York City to Washington, D.C. corridor. The Eastern Seaboard has a lot of people. Southern Ontario to Ottawa or Toronto to Montreal, feasible, I would believe, right? Potentially. But I do not believe that or we're going to pay for the Vancouver to the Blaine portion of it.
Yeah, in which case, done deal, right?
Yeah, we still have difficulty moving the White Rock tracks from White Rock Beach over. We're still having that debate, and I think people of White Rock would love it if we moved it. So it's a classic mid-July story. It's pie in the sky. It's wonderful. Nobody's against high-speed rail.
John Horgan and his best bud, Jay Inslee, they're going to get it done.
Yeah, until somebody hands you the bill, and those things do go over budget because it's technology.
Where are you going to find the corridor to do it?
You're going to have to find that corridor, convince people that this is what we need. That's why high-speed rail would work from LA to Sacramento. That's why it does work in Japan, with a country of 125 million
Washington,
people.
New York, okay. You can see
but it's
here?
Eastern Seaboard. In Europe, because once again, you got 250, 300 million people in a much smaller geographic region than you do here.
And you also have 3 cities. Portland, I would say, is a little bit better in transportation infrastructure than Seattle and Vancouver. It's got 3 cities who have major transportation challenges internally. It's not like we've built every SkyTrain line we need. It's not like we've built every light rail line we need. It's not like we have rapid buses everywhere. We're like billions and billions and billions of dollars behind in that infrastructure. So to do this would just distract from the actual...
You go to your average Vancouverite, and let's just say it's a $50 billion project, and our cost, let's say, is 20% of that. So we're doing $10 billion. Would you want to spend $10 billion for high-speed rail from here to the border and eventually to Seattle, and the U.S. covers the rest? Or would you spend that $10 billion extending SkyTrain from Commercial Drive to UBC, or driving it further, like the Expo line in Surrey, which we desperately need more lines in Surrey, pushing it out to, let's just say, the Expo line out to the 200th Street overpass, so then folks from Chilliwack and Abbotsford can come in, put a park and ride there, and bring that Expo line to a lot more people.
Plus the North Shore you could do for that price as well.
Or other lines in Surrey, driving it further into South Surrey, right, around King George. I would believe most people who would support high-speed rail would say, look, let's focus on the domestic issues first, the internal issues with the lower mainland, and let's worry about that later. And if you really need to get to the U.S. really quickly, do what I just did, get an access pass. My wife's been haranguing me for a long time, and I finally went through the process. We got it done, and it's great.
The problem for us is we always travel with the kids, and we're just like, we got to get them, then we get the passes for them.
I did that too. I got the little one as well, and now my mother-in-law wants one as well, so I got to do that next week.
So okay,
but it works, and it's great.
No, totally,
No one's against high-speed rail, but is it our number one priority today in this region, right here, right now? I don't think so.
I'm trying to think when it would be. If you built out all the other infrastructure, maybe 25 years, then we could start talking about the kind of thing.
Yeah, and the population
who knows the
grow
technology?
To 3 or 4 million at that time, and exactly.
All right. While we're still on transportation, let's talk about the BC Utilities gas price review. Nothing has irritated me more in the past few months than this nonsense Utilities Commission review, which will review the reasons why Vancouver residents pay more for gasoline than other areas of Canada, but won't actually talk about the difference in taxes, the fact that we have the clean gasoline additives, so we have to mix petroleum differently, and it doesn't talk about the fact that we restrict the pipelines bringing in this fuel to our city. So.
You nailed it.
It's all the gas station's fault, apparently.
Yeah, and that's,
it's crazy.
I've been around for too long, I think, because I still remember when Glenn Clark, I think it was Glenn Clark in the 90s, right before the 96 election, I believe, ordered the same thing.
You're right.
And you need a boogeyman, and the big, bad fossil fuel companies are the ones to blame. And it's a little of everything. It's about our extraction. It's about refining. It's where we are located geographically. It's the fact that we don't have significant refinery capacity here. And to build a refinery this day and age, you've got to find the capital to do so. And most importantly, you've got to go through significant regulatory process, a significant process, to get that sector approved. So if you and I started today and found the money, I guarantee you it would take us about 10 years for it to move forward if everything worked up and lined up.
It's a great way to turn $10 billion into a few $100 million.
But that's the problem.
We'd be bankrupted by the Elizabeth Mays of the world.
So that's the problem. We don't build refineries in the country, and we haven't. And to think that magically shutting us off fossil fuels today is going to solve the longer challenges of global climate change. It's real. We have to do something about it. But to think that picking fights with fossil fuel companies is going to do it, that's not it. We actually have to look at our own consumption patterns on a personal level, and the products we buy, how we use it, and that's how it's going to get there. But this type of review, it'll make it'll be lots of print copy on it. We'll come back, they'll send it out to the public, and they'll look at it. It'll be a big debate, and nothing is going to change because those costs are built in. And you're right, a lot of it is taxation, and we have to look at that. And it also is that we are pushing for cleaner fuels, that you're right. then perhaps we should all be looking at electric cars. Is it the right time, or do you wait 5 years from now?
Yep.
So I'd expect nothing to be solved by this, period. I have said from day one, I think climate change is real. I think we have something to do about it. I'm not against the carbon tax. I just believe we should have kept it at $30 per ton and wait for other jurisdictions to catch up. And revenue neutral, right? Washington State does not have a carbon tax. It's much easier today with the NDP's taxes, 19 new taxes they've either introduced or increased. It's much easier, which is about $5.5 billion in new taxes, so it's about $1,100 for every man, woman, and child in new taxes on the NDP.
No, it's only coming from rich people and foreigners, Jas. Come on.
But if you're setting up a business today, why would you not set it up in Bellingham?
No, exactly. You'd be
right?
crazy. Cheaper energy costs, cheaper carbon.
And we're talking about affordability. In my riding, you've got the Lafarge plant, and in the Delta side, you've got Lehigh.
Yeah.
I mean, if those folks who create the cement, who pay for that carbon tax, you keep taxing more and more, those can just shut down and set up across the border.
Yeah.
And then we'll be buying our cement from Washington State,
Yes.
where they don't pay a carbon tax. And then we got to ship it across the border. And how does that help affordability in regards to building things in this province, right?
No, you're exactly
So it doesn't make any sense. So it's political theater, sadly, but we're going to have to live with it, you know?
To me, the carbon tax stuff is the most interesting side story of the October federal election.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Scheer is elected on this tech not tax climate change platform, if Canadians accept that that's the route to take, and it seems like Trudeau's really putting everything in on the carbon tax bandwagon, all of a sudden, all these other carbon tax regimes across the country are going to collapse.
Yeah.
And again, BC will stand alone.
Yeah.
And it's, after a decade, we'll have to sit back and have a conversation as a province, right? Like, are you actually a climate leader if no one is following you?
Yeah. No, I think that's you are seeing more subnational economies and economies heading in this direction. Mm-hmm. They've been a lot slower at it than we were. I got to remind people the NDP opposed the tax, and now they're supportive of it. I think that is a legitimate issue that you raise. But I think at this moment, I think when I look at my son, he's 10 years old, and I don't know if your kids feel this way, they're very attuned to climate. They're very attuned to doing what's right in regards to the environment and helping the earth. There is a generational shift in this, I believe. And it's not just necessarily millennials are going to come up and say, we have to do something about it. Baby boomers see it. The conversation in and around climate, you talk amongst family, friends, everybody feels patterns have changed, right? You go to poor farmers in India, where I used to do a lot of stories on food security and water security. They know things have changed. I think we are heading in the right direction dealing with this issue globally. We haven't built consensus around it. So I think we're in the right heading in the right direction. But I would still keep it at $30 per ton. But if the rest of Canada doesn't follow, then we have a longer term conversation to have. Yeah. I do believe Canadians will head in that direction inevitably. It may take a little longer for some regions and some political leaders, but we're going to have to do something about what we call climate change. But right now, $30 per ton, revenue neutral is where it needs to be. I would actually get to the point where I'd say take that money and put it towards tech funds that can actually have centers where you actually look at climate change and study climate change. Rather than putting all of these things to general revenue. Right? In this case, it was revenue neutral. It was fine. But I think as we move forward, we should be looking at particular funds where it can drive the study of climate change and companies that can potentially earn the cutting edge. Yeah, it's a mitigation. Yeah. And I think people are okay with that. It's when you send it into that general revenue black hole people get concerned about. Yeah. And I think people wouldn't have a problem with tolls if it was fair. And that money actually went to, let's say, I'm going to throw pitch pasta here. Let's say it's $1 every time you go over a bridge. It's $1 and $1 coming back. And the maximum you would pay is $500 a year. You cap it. And that money then would go to a transportation fund that would only pay for infrastructure on a regular basis in the lower mainland, not to go into the general revenue black hole. I think British Columbians and then can see things occurring, like bridges being built, SkyTrain being extended. That helps the city. Sure. But when you're only in the last case, I think with tolling with Massey, not Massey, sorry, with Port Mann, it's one part of the region. Right. Surrey and Langley residents shouldn't be bearing the brunt of it. Totally. Right. We paved Lionsgate in the 1990s. That was about 100 million, 120 million at that time. That came out of general revenue. Yeah. Right. They weren't paying a toll on that, even though they used to in the early days, of course. And so it has to be fair. And that's the challenge that we have. The fairness aspect as well. Absolutely was lost. You mentioned electric vehicles. We should talk
briefly about the subsidy.
Yeah.
Have you followed Dr. Weaver's advice and remortgaged your home in order to buy yourself your electric vehicle?
No, I haven't yet.
Well,
I know.
it's almost like the doctor should stick to
Yes.
academics rather than financial advice, perhaps.
All finances are personal, and every family doesn't have the luxury to buy even a $35,000 or $35,000
Yes.
Volt or something like that. Never mind a $70,000
Yes.
a Tesla. Look, we all need to get to that point where we are driving electric vehicles or vehicles that are much cleaner than they are today. The challenge we have is where people can get to that point where they're doing so. If you read the headlines today, I think the UK was going to provide some funding for Jaguar, but I think it's $500 million to go to electric. You're seeing many companies in China domestically now for the Chinese market going electric. Everybody's heading in that direction.
Yeah.
That's the right thing to do. And we've provided a subsidy. Ontario had provided a subsidy. Now it's gone. Federal government's providing a subsidy. I think recently the NDP government reduced the subsidy down to $50,000. I think that's the right thing to do. We shouldn't be subsidizing the purchase of Teslas that are $70,000, the Model S, and I think that's the right way to go. However, I would actually probably consider lowering it even more, so that the average person who's buying a Chevy Volt or those types of vehicles in that $35,000 range, 40, get that money. Most people still are not buying $50,000 vehicles, right? And so it's a case of when we reach critical mass. That's the issue. What I find surprising, and I've said this already, the NDP were against Site C.
Yes.
Yet they want everybody in an electric vehicle by, I believe, by 2040.
Yes.
BC,
Where is that power coming from?
Business Council of BC did a study, and their study showed that if everybody went to an electric car, you would need 2 Site Cs. So the hypocrisy of the NDP to oppose the very power that's going to fuel the future with clean energy, it boggles the mind. And that's why they opposed LNG, and now they support LNG and all that sort of thing. So we're headed in the right direction. And I was out door knocking a few months back, and I had a resident there polishing a $70,000 Tesla. And I asked him, I said, like, look, when you travel, do you still have to see where the next location you go to in regards to powering your car? And he says, no. He goes, there's so many of them now when he goes down the I-5 that he doesn't even worry about it, right? The range has gone from 200 to about 400.
Right, that's a big difference.
It is a difference, but 400 still is, don't use the windshield wipers, try not to use the AC.
Yeah.
Like, it drops pretty quick.
That's
I think when they make that next jump to 400 to 600 or 800, it's going to be significant for people. I think that's very important. But we are also reaching a point where a shopping mall may provide you free electricity when you park your electric vehicle. I know a lot of city halls also have free power where people can power up. But eventually, we have to start looking at our building code. So when you're building a condo unit, you should be putting in electric power for each parking spot. What's the cost of that? And do we mandate that? In California, I think it's 2020 or 2021, solar power is mandatory now for every home. And it works for that region, right? It may not work for us yet. So those are the kind of things I think we should be looking at, the building code, right? I had a house in my riding in the last election campaign I visited. And it's an older sort of 1980s single-family home. But they reconfigured it all, and they had a Tesla battery in the garage, solar on the roof, and they were actually selling power back into the grid. I think it was at $10 or $15.
So they're meeting all of their needs.
And then selling
plus
back.
Selling.
Some months they wouldn't, and it would cost about $10 a month to them. So the cost of doing that was about $16,000 for that home owner. The average person, I don't think, is going to spend $16,000. Now, if you can build that cost into a new home, it's potential. So it goes back to, do we make this mandatory now to a certain degree? That's the kind of conversation we should be having. Now, 2 years ago, that was $16,000. I bet you that's probably come down to about $13,000 or $12,000 now. So we're going to reach a tipping point very soon, between 1 or 2 more election cycles, where this is the norm. And I also believe when somebody buys, and the studies have been done, when somebody buys a fossil fuel vehicle, there's 20 million of them sold, I believe, in North America every year. That means the fossil fuel industry, with that purchase of that vehicle, now will fuel that vehicle. Mechanics will have to take care of that vehicle. You will have to provide oil changes and brakes, and those companies will have to build all of that and provide those services. Generally, when a vehicle is bought, it's a 20-year cycle into the system, right? So the fossil fuel industry isn't going anywhere simply because your neighbor just bought a fossil fuel vehicle today.
Yeah.
So for the next 20 years, he's going to have that for 7 years or 10 years. And then he's going to maybe give it to his kid for a year or two. Then the kid's going to sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's in the system.
Yeah.
And to keep paying for that is going to take a long time for it to cycle out.
Sure.
So we're reaching a critical mass with cleaner vehicles.
Yeah.
But do not think for a second that we're going to hit electrical power, all electric vehicles tomorrow. 2040 is a great aspirational target. I think it's wonderful. But do understand the story of our time, particularly in Asia, but here as well. It's not Brexit. It's not Donald Trump. It's our consumption patterns and how we make that jump to that green economy.
Yeah.
Right? And the way you can do that is probably through enticing people through subsidies, but somewhere along the way, government has to stop those subsidies. Like we're spending, we had set aside $40 million over a term to subsidize.
Yeah. It was gone.
It was, and now people are
Which is
realizing
great.
subsidies there. It's gone. But I mean, I had one constituent call me about 6 months ago, and what was happening, and I was watching. There's a tracker actually on the government website, BC government website. The subsidy was going down $1 million a week. So what happens is Tesla, knowing full well Ontario and BC have a subsidy program, they will drive sales in those markets. And because the subsidy was declining so quickly, my constituents, and there's various Tesla chat groups, everybody started talking amongst themselves. So he tried to move ahead of the line by a couple of weeks, knowing full the subsidy was going to decline or be gone. And so the day he picked up his Tesla, we were down to 100,000 left in the fund at about 1:30, 2 o'clock. And I'm like, oh my God. I actually called a couple of news organizations and said, this is going down. And what happened is in an hour, I looked at the tracker, 10 million. So the government
topped it up.
Yeah, what was happening is over the weekend, there were no pickups for Tesla.
Right.
Because I think they got word from the government, it's slow down here, guys. We're not going to have money in the thing until Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
So they actually didn't provide any vehicles over the weekend. So my constituent went on the Monday, got his vehicle, got his subsidy.
That's the bigger subsidy.
Got it. And then the government topped it up. So they're actually trying to slow down the pickups. So everybody was on this bandwagon. Now, in the perfect world, at one point, now that we've reduced our subsidy by a couple $1,000s, you could have got a $5,000 subsidy from the BC government, $5,000 from the federal government, and then we have a provincial scrap it program where you can get rid of your clunker, which is another $5,000. So some people we're collecting a taxpayer-funded $15,000 to $16,000 subsidy. Now, to spur purchase of electric, I think that's great. But if the person's buying a $70,000 Model S, I got a problem with that.
Yeah, they're probably okay.
They're okay.
Yeah.
So that's why you reduce it. But somewhere along the way, that subsidy has to go away as well.
And in fact, I think in the very beginning there was no cap at all. Actually,
No.
Ontario ran into this problem, and so people were buying $150,000, $200,000 cars and getting their subsidy, and then governments, including the BC Liberals, I think, came in and said, whoa, wait a minute. Those cars are crazy expensive. Let's bring it down to 75 or whatever the cap was. But even then, of course, Tesla goes, great, 75?
But
74,499 for
that's
this
exactly
car.
what 50 is going to be $49.99.
These businesses are smart, right?
Yeah,
like
because they know.
Tesla's smart.
Yeah, they'll do that. So that's where I think.
Yeah, wherever you put the threshold, they'll make sure they have one right up against it.
Electric car population represents about 3% of all vehicles, which is, I think, the highest in Canada.
Yeah.
I think somewhere along the way, we have to decide what's critical mass. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? And then the government's out of the subsidy business.
Yeah.
So I think that has to be baked in.
And out of the HOV business. How does that, if 5 or 10% of the cars are electric?
Yeah, then you got a problem.
And they're all able to use HOV lanes?
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough too.
That's part of the solution. Ride-hailing.
Get your decal now if you have an electric vehicle.
And God, we got to continue to build more buses, and significantly more high-speed.
Okay, I want to ask you one more thing about electricity.
Yeah.
LNG Kitimat.
Yeah.
So this is the Chevron proposed project. They're thinking of a final investment decision 2022, 2023. That's kind of their window.
Yeah.
And if they did it, they would build in the late 2020s.
Yeah.
They came out, they're still making tiny little baby steps towards that FID, but they came out this week and said, if we do this, it'll be powered by electricity.
Yeah.
Which makes it LNG even cleaner.
Yes.
But it's also a huge draw on the electrical grid.
Yes. Now, first of all, when I used to work for the LNG industry, there were projects that were electric drive, I think one in the United States, pretty large facility. But generally speaking, the wood fiber project in Squamish is electric drive, but that's about $1.5 billion project compared to LNG Canada, which is $40 billion.
Right.
So the big projects have always run on natural gas because you want surety of supply. You want, you lose electric power over a couple of days. that could mean 2 shipments could be $100 million.
That's a good point.
Is hydro going to subsidize 2 days of a blackout?
Yeah.
Because I don't think they subsidize Jordan Bateman when his
Nope.
family's out for a few hours, right? So now in LNG Canada's defense, the ancillary power is all from the electric grid.
Yes.
So that does drive down the power that they use. So this is, first of all, great news. Depending on the size of their facility, which is going to be probably 2 train, I don't know, could be 4. You know, there is a draw. You probably have to build a line to go up there via Prince George of some capacity to carry that kind of power. 400 megawatts, 600 megawatts.
It's incredible.
Site C would probably be about 1,100 megawatts of full power that it can, the output. So 2 big, large LNG facilities could probably eat up all of Site C, maybe 3 facilities max, which is which is kind of a bit of a stretch.
And under the NDP's deal, they pay a slightly reduced power rate.
Yeah. Now, look, Site C would be great if we could also transfer some of that power towards the oil sands, which reduces the emissions that they create in its totality. So Site C
No, we only care about emissions in BC, Jas. That's all that counts. What we do to help the rest of the world get cleaner should never matter to anyone else.
I think it's Chevron it's wonderful news. It is going to be the cleanest LNG in the world, but you have to create energy to create that LNG.
Yeah.
So if LNG Canada and Chevron both ran on electric drive, my God, that's a lot of power being consumed and used. So that would eat up a lot of Site C's
absolutely
production. So
you know, I'm hopeful for this project. I mean, obviously for all the economic spin-offs, but I've been reading about home prices in Kitimat Terrace, Prince Rupert, and with the announcement of LNG Canada, the home prices there have doubled.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, great. What we don't want to see happen with the LNG industry are these towns, you know, all the people move in to build the plants and then they leave.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have all these empty homes and you know, a little bit of a ghost town feel.
Yeah.
So what I do like about this, the timing of this second plant, this LNG Kitimat plant, is that, okay, maybe LNG Canada finishes up or is near final construction, and those workers get to move right over into LNG Canada.
Look, there's a couple things. First of all, there is a bit of a boom and bust to this issue. You need a significant amount of workers for a short period of time. You know, you can need 4,000 people for a pipeline. They're going to be gone once that pipeline's done. The LNG Canada facility alone, once it's completed, will probably have 100 employees, maybe 200 max. So let's just say it's 100. Those are high-paying jobs.
Yeah.
A facility like that may pay $500 million in taxes per
incredible.
year, every year, during its lifetime. That's the benefit, right? And it's driving down emissions in China. That's the benefit. You got significant amount of First Nations who are involved in the construction phase, picking up skills in the hospitality sector as well, starting their own businesses. And if they have that economic generation at this early stage, they're going to be able to make good decisions for themselves as well. The fact that Chevron wants to start after LNG Canada is very smart. What you saw in Australia was that a lot of these LNG facilities during, I think there's 6 or 7 facilities that they built, they overlapped so much that they were actually fighting over labor.
Yeah.
So the average cleaner in Australia was making 150,000 Australian, which is roughly equal to Canadian, right? A cook at a camp is making 175,000.
Right.
There literally were...
Because if they didn't, they'd be poached by the guy next door.
They literally were people standing at the gate as workers are going into work saying, I'll offer you 10% more if you come to our facility.
Yeah.
The Gorgon project, or I think it was an Exxon project, I think Chevron was part of that as well. I think the budget was $37 billion to build it. It came to, I think, $52 billion. I don't know how that project, it will eventually make money, I guess, in the long term. But those cost overruns are because of fight over labor. Right? So the fact that they're delaying, just as LNG Canada is finishing up, I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
There will be a Pattullo project, probably. There will be some sort of a SkyTrain extension. So you also don't want to have so many people working at these facilities that you don't have enough people to work here locally, which further drives up costs.
And Site C is closing in on 5,000 workers.
Yeah, exactly. So there's those challenges as well. So that also drives up costs. I mean, they did a study in Perth, Australia during this boom. The cost of hamburgers and a beer doubled in price.
Yeah.
Right? In some of these facilities. So house prices have gone up. Yes, they are. But what has Kitimat got? They've got a brand new hotel. They didn't have one, the Microtel. There's a second one that's opened up. So they can actually have hockey tournaments in their community.
Yeah.
So those kind of...
the BCHL, LNG Canada, is bringing 2 regular season BCHL games to Kitimat. Langley Rivermen versus Prince George Spurs games.
I didn't know that.
And it's exciting because, it's probably a little baby step towards them getting their own little franchise and having hockey there. It's fantastic.
So that's amazing,
Yeah.
and there will be people moving out. There is a bit of a boom there, but with it, you're going to have great jobs that pay well and will pay dividends for that community over the long term. And mostly, I would also add, here in Vancouver, First Nations communities can leverage their land for development, as we see in Tawasin First Nation, which is the first urban treaty signed, the Squamish First Nation, the Musqueam, all are leveraging their land for many projects. It's difficult when you're in the north to leverage that land.
Yeah.
And so when a pipeline goes through, that is work for your people, that is a revenue stream for the next 30 to 40 years that will always be there, that allows you to make decisions for your community, right? And it allows over the long term to help Asia make that transition from coal to natural gas, and eventually, as we see with the car population in China, move towards real renewables, but also electric vehicles as well. So it's a win-win-win for not only the globe, but locally as well. So look, this is transformational.
Yeah.
People forget LNG Canada's project alone, in mid-construction, will be one of the largest industrial projects on the planet.
Yeah.
So we're in a good space in that
incredible.
case, and I'm very proud of what the BC Liberals have done, ICBA members have done in regards to that, and the fight that you all led as well, the industry has done as well. I just hope the NDP, hold my breath, what are they doing now to build something 10 years from now that will also start a new industry or lead to that kind of investment in this province that's private sector and will help not only the province, First Nations communities, but the globe as well. And I won't hold my breath when it comes to that.
Exactly. Jas Johal, MLA, Richmond-Queensborough. You should get out and vote for him in 2021 or sooner, depending on what happens. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back again next time.